Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sigma Prism YouTube channel. Today, we have members from Sentient Security Corporation. And very quickly, as I usually do for guests, I'm going to preface the conversation with a bit of a summary about what they do and why they're doing it. Sentient Security Corporation is a privacy-focused company that designs and supplies home monitoring solutions using utilizing cutting edge cyber security standards and practices. Their mission is to offer a viable alternative to unsecured, cheap products that collect, retain, and sell as much data as possible about the consumer. So, with that being said, the largest issue that they see in the current landscape is the advent of surveillance capitalism. MNCs or multinational companies understand that data, specifically data that can be used to sell targeted advertising, is extremely valuable. According to an Economist article from 2017, the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. Their idea with sentient security is that your data should be yours. You should own it and have full autonomy to control where it goes, where it gets stored, and who has access to it. A few core principles about sentient security as well, from a business standpoint, is that everything is made in the USA. Components sourced are also from trusted US trade partners. It's privacy focused and modular in design. And the background of the members of this business also have expertise in the military. So without any further ado, welcome Sentient Security. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Great opportunity to be here, talk more about our what we're working on in our company, and we're excited to chat about it.
Perfect. So first and foremost, what made you want to take on this kind of uh, ambiguous, invisible crisis that is data harvesting and basically, as you mentioned in your executive summary that I just read, the advent of the surveillance market and selling data.
I could
You know,
speak to that a little bit. So
sure.
I guess we all kind of have this blockchain background. I guess like one of the resonating kind of attributes of that group are people who are really cognizant of self sovereignty. So
Right.
we kind of work from first principles back using kind of like the ergo approach. Like, what were things in the space that we saw like problems, and how were we going to address them with the technology we had at our disposal? And I think blockchain addresses sovereignty of a financial level, but there also seems to be this data and intellectual sovereignty that kind of is slipping through the gaps. So with like the ring hacks and all these things, it seemed pertinent to design a device that could fill that gap and provide a secure video monitoring system to everyday users. And I think it was it's one of those things that came out of the Sentient Foundation, and Taylor right away kind of had the vision to like get the rubber to the road with this and kind of bring it to market and bring these big ideas and condense them down into something that retail can implement in their house.
Yeah, I think the idea we sort of did it in a non-traditional approach. We talking with Joe, we identified a problem that is plaguing, our society, geopolitical issues, and we identified the problem. We know that people are concerned about these issues like data, like the supply chain and home security. So we took those three pillars and we whittled down from there on what we can do to address these three issues. And then through that, we've developed a phased approach to work through each one of these in concert to get us to an end state goal of addressing all three of these and then leading from the front on how to build out an ecosystem that addresses all three of these pillars.
Now, what relevance does your military background play in kind of understanding, more about the protection of data as it pertains to perhaps national security or how, malicious actors from abroad with no accountability. We all hear about this Huawei scandal, and TikTok is really just Vine or some sort of stream, social media platform disguised as a giant data harvesting company. So what has given you, kind of from your background, more insight into, okay, this is a real problem and not that many people are paying attention to it, and we should actually devise a solution for that?
I think there's a convergence here, right? So it's not just the military backgrounds, right? So I think Taylor and I's military background gives us the perspective where defense and security starts with defense in depth, right? So we can't just simply protect a surface level area, right? We have to look at whatever we're protecting holistically, and understanding that the situation that we're attempting to go in and secure is always more complicated than you initially think, right? And so you can't simply secure the known avenues of approach or the most likely avenues of approach, right? You have to address all attack vectors, right? And so if you take that understanding of security, of how to implement that in a general sense, and then add in a technical introduce those concepts to something like information technology, where we're already seeing a trend in security convergence, where you're having this convergence of physical and information technology silos into one. We're looking to apply those same principles when people are using, whether it's a piece of electronic that says this camera or this doorbell or whatever is going to secure your home, right? Looking beyond that surface level statement, the piece of equipment may actually fulfill the function, right, that it states. But there's a fundamental risk in the development of that product in a globalized supply chain with what is essentially amounts to hostile nation state actors in control of the means of production. And you introduce those pieces into the system, it becomes, now you start taking where we originally started with the data issues. A lot of these apps, a lot of these equipment come from economies where separation between state and corporation is blurred or non-existent. And so you have access into not only just the digital value of the data, right, or the value of the data, that digital asset, but the actual hardware. And we're seeing it with whether it's Chinese phones, and again, not xenophobic, not to focus on China, to focus essentially on any supply chain risk, right? We're not addressing it in the right manner. And it goes back into how valuable data is, and the marketing of security systems without addressing that fundamental risk. Sorry, now I had my point, and now I tampered off. So I hope I got that initial point across before I fizzled out.
It would be military guys who say that their military background doesn't actually affect, but both these guys have pretty extensive, privacy and informational backgrounds. I think Taylor can probably attest to it most with his time in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, so to bridge off of what Nick laid out, sort of the cyber and the information IT OT side of things. My expertise more comes along traditional physical security. So, your doors, your windows, locks, secures. I was doing assessments of dispensaries and other physical security, trying to penetrate buildings and to see how secure physically they are. So what we're trying to accomplish with what Nick laid out, as well as your traditional home monitoring and security system, is to be a total secure 21st century secure provider for the home, so that all aspects of the home, both the network as well as the physical aspect of the home, are protected. And what we're seeing is that there are great companies that do one or the other, but the gap necessarily hasn't been bridged between those two to have a sole enterprise level solution for the average consumer or small business to have that level of protection.
And then just kind of build off of, Taylor's background. I think one thing that, at least I can attest to is that when you're at like a bank, or you're getting your CBD or medical marijuana, all those transactions are on tape, and they have to be for state compliance. And in recent years, you had the McCain Act, which has kind of outlined where manufactured goods can and can't come from if they're being put on federal property, especially for surveillance. So we kind of saw this perfect storm of money being injected to the economy through things like this semiconductor bill, and kind of, a space being laid out with bills like the McCain Act. And it seemed like kind of the perfect time to implement some of our, backgrounds, and kind of, take the bull by the horn and, fill this gap and lead from the front.
Yeah, we definitely have. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to say we definitely have lofty ambitions. We know what we're trying to do here. We're taking on Amazon, Google, these large corporations and entities. So what we've tried to do is break it out into different phase aspects of business development. Start with something that we know and that we can speak to generally and intelligently about, which is home security, as well as a general network security aspect of it. And then once we're able to accomplish these levels step by step, slowly build out that supply chain manufacturing in-house so we can really accomplish what our end state goal is. So this is a multi-year, this is going to be a long process to get to where we need to go, but we feel that we got to strike while the iron's hot with this. The conditions are right for this sort of business and this sort of idea and framework out there. And we got to do it in a phased, slow approach so that we can meet our mark and don't, get over our. I'm not a skier, but if you lean too far over your skis, you don't want to tumble over. So we got to take that methodical approach to this.
Yeah, why do you think things, for example, I think of Joe mentioned medical marijuana, there are so many guidelines and safeguards, and you can't use like a federal bank for it, and all the money has to be dealt with in a certain way. There's quality assurance, got to make sure that the CBD doesn't have THC and blah, 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 blah. Why do you think there's so much focus on or over focus on the physical items that we can purchase, like goods essentially? And everybody wants to keep track of that, but things like data are kind of hazier and they get lost in translation. If you have just a new app on the App Store and it takes several years to figure out, hey, Facebook is actually stealing that, or for the public to really catch on to what's going on. And is it negligence by legislators that don't really understand these things as much as they should, because they do allow it?
Yeah, I would say like unfortunately, all this stuff that comes through on the legislative side is like, 4 years behind when it needs to be implemented, right? So the McCain Act came out in, 2018, and John McCain was already deceased for 2 years. So it's like one of these things that by the time the issue is addressed, companies like, or even, countries like China have already pivoted to circumvent these regulatory, gates we put up. So I think one of the good examples is when you look at companies like LTS, which is a security company, they're basically just rebranding cameras that are coming out of China as LTS so that they can sell them and circumvent the McCain Act. So, by the time we put up the gateway, somebody's already, picking the lock. So we're always like a step behind on the litigious end, but I think that's just the nature of bureaucracy, right?
But I do think there are examples like California's Privacy Act, right, where we are starting to address these things in the United States, and it does take time. And we do have the European Union's GDPR to look to, which is, we're seeing a lot of changes with how European entities operating in the EU have to change it. And as we know, everybody whoever now on the internet now sees, right, you have to pick your cookies, right? That's all GDPR, right? So now there is action being taken. It is slow, right? And it doesn't maybe address the entire issue, but it is being pushed. And in the United States, we are definitely 4 years behind. I think Europe implemented the GDPR 2018, something like that.
Yeah, 2018. Yep.
2018, and California has had, I think, at least since 2019 or 2020, and so it's really, it's at a state level issue, right? And so we have to push legislation and representatives and political appointees, whoever, I'm not a political person, but, push the political side to get people to move to make this a federal issue, right? To have federal guidelines on how companies handle privacy, what they're allowed to do, and what they have to declare to consumers before they actually collect, store, clean, and process it. But yeah, we are definitely behind, and there's definitely not enough being done in the U.S. Or conversely, we could be looking at the idea wrong, where the collection of data may not be an issue, or we may have to. It's still a complicated idea it's just emerging and we're trying to figure it out.
I think another aspect of it is the tangibility versus intangibility of it. You talked about physical products that people can go out and buy and see, and they know what it does. So I think that's a lot easier to sort of wrap your mind around the legislative aspect of it, and it can be moved quicker. Like you got stuff like the network aspect of things, the cybersecurity realm, data, like what a cookie is. I bet if you did a poll of a majority of individuals, they couldn't lay out even what a cookie is for you. So that sort of aspect of it, of not being able to tangibly touch your own data and understand where it goes, what it does, and what it's used for, I think is what wraps some people up and why there may be a slow response to it, because every day something new is developed or comes out in the tech aspect or the tech sphere, and it's being, continually pushed forward with legislative running up behind it. So I think that's also a factor in this.
It'll be nice to see when there's a big case that actually breaks out, like the Cambridge Analytics with Facebook. I think there has to be that kind of hallmark case that brings this stuff to the forefront, because I think everybody's aware of the data harvesting, but they don't really understand to what extent. And everybody gets that weird, that unnerving feeling when you're talking to somebody about something and you look at your phone, right? And it's right there. You're getting ads for it already and you've never even typed anything in. And I think a lot of people still write that out as I'm being paranoid or it's a coincidence. But, I go under the presumption, right? Like you're always being recorded, and anything that you're doing, anytime that you step into the internet or log onto the internet, it's a two-way street. So you're open, and anything that you're doing is basically like public domain.
Yeah. Before I take that to the blockchain side of things and how that could relate to public addresses, right? One of the reasons Bitcoin was eventually accepted is because you can really look at the blockchain history and see where everything is going, even though there was intentions early on to make it more privacy centric. But before that, this seems like to be like a newer problem that, as you guys are pretty much highlighting, it's so quick and there is such a lag around regulation around it. But it seems very relevant, and like these conversations aren't being had more often because people don't really understand also why should they care about their data, and what can you really use with that information apart from target consumers. It seems that many people don't care about it because it may seem more benign to the individual. What is the value of data to an individual if they have it, sovereignty over that data, and choose how to who gets permission to it and things of that nature?
Maybe I can start off with something easy that people can understand from like the blockchain realm. So if you think about like the Brave browser, right? What did they do? They identified, right? There was already people using DuckDuckGo and things like Mozilla to kind of, be more privacy minded. But what did they really realize is that there is a benefit to having ad revenue. But if you can distribute that revenue through the people who are actually going through these channels and give them a slice of the pie, that, it's a win-win. I think something that's maybe more like understandable would be like, what if Pepsi, or Coca-Cola, if you bought, if you're buying Pepsi or Coke all the time, and then they sent you, some free Coca-Cola, I think it's very analogous to that, where companies are starting to realize if we gave 10% of the things we're getting from utilizing people's data, that we could really help build this grassroots community that's supportive, and it can be more of a mutually beneficial relationship than a predatory one. And I think companies like Facebook are having a real hard time pivoting because they've been predatory for so long. So Facebook, how many times you see a multi-trillion-dollar company rebrand? So, they've marred their image so much that they had to actually change their name to Meta. And I mean, I think you're probably in the space. You've probably seen how terrible their metaverse renderings look right now. It hasn't been a good look. So I think it's one of those things where it's, corporations are starting to realize with DAOs and things of this nature that there needs to be a give and take between the consumer and the company, and that, you make this kind of symbiotic relationship where if I benefit, the customer can benefit. And I think that's where, like, I think especially blockchain has like a big, place in my heart and place in the way I conduct things, because, right, like people like us, we're kind of everyday citizens. We're not allotted the same freedom as somebody like, Donald Trump, right? Like if you wanted my tax returns, you can get my tax returns with a subpoena. I don't have lawyers to fight that stuff. But if you want Trump's tax returns, we're still waiting, right? We're never going to see that stuff. So it's, it's kind of with public ledger and, these like, mutually beneficial programs like the Brave token, it's kind of leveling the playing field for everybody.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, that's sort of the initial pushback a lot of people see. It's like, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why does this matter? It's only advertising that they're coming after us with. If I don't want to buy something, I'm not going to buy it. That's sort of the mindset that's out there right now as it relates to data and sort of the privacy at large scale. But a couple of recent things that are coming out is not just targeted advertising is what data is being used for. One example is that it just actually happened recently with the Google Cloud. An individual, a father took a photo of his son to send to his doctor. It was automatically uploaded to the Google Cloud, and the Google Cloud, classified it as, child pornography, and it was locked out of his account permanently, and Google stood by the decision and didn't reverse that. And then you have examples like Ring, which is sending video of the home or the front of the home to local law enforcement without any permissions or any warrants being asked of them. They're sending the video to local law enforcement. And then one, that is not really relevant to the security aspect, but 23andMe, they're collecting all of the data that comes from the genomics aspect of their tests, and they're selling it to pharmaceutical companies. So pharmaceutical companies can get an idea of what these people, their genetic makeup is, so they can target what to build out on the pharmaceutical side. So there are increases rather than just, the traditional targeted advertising. There seem to be more and more ways that data is being used, not just to target advertisements.
And so to just kind of sum that up, I think what the overall topic here is this idea of data stewardship, right? And beyond just an administrative aspect of data stewardship, right? An ethical stewardship, right? So these companies, right? The utility of this data is real, right? It does make everyone's life easier. Your personal opinion on what the data actually does, that's up for debate, right? But it's the stewardship, the responsibility of whoever is maintaining this data, processing it, storing it, transferring, what rights and responsibilities do they have, and what do they owe to the consumer? Beyond just business uses, also security wise. And I think that's where really we don't have this solidified, maybe federal regulation on government use of data, right? We have a lot of federal regulations in place on stewardship of data, right? Specifically working with any federal organizations, and there's not really a corporate or we're working with things like CISA, when all these national infrastructure programs and cybersecurity initiatives, we're working there, but we need to get that answer on the both ethical, admin, and the financial side of the data stewardship issue. Sorry, I always end up rambling. I have an idea, and then
No, you're the closer, Nick. You wrap everything together because Joe and I ramble through.
Put a little bow on it.
So Now, yeah, I mean, the way you guys are framing the photo and the picture of data, it is true. In a very short period of time, we've gone from Web 1, right, read-only version of the internet, where you might use it to look up, the equivalent of information that you would find in a physical version of an encyclopedia. We went from that kind of these closed systems and very, in our lifetimes and the course of 15 years or so, we've gone through Web 2, we've gone through smart devices in our homes that are also, again, unbeknownst to the average consumer, hearing everything you're doing, like the Alexas and things of that nature. And we have a growing monopoly of tech companies essentially at the top, not come any antitrust scrutiny, and pretty much creating their own walled gardens of money, data, and also a steady stream of loyal consumers that will use them increasingly more for more and more variety of products.
Yeah, and you bring up the Amazon Alexa aspect of it. And I think that's a perfect example. Like Amazon just recently acquired the iRoomba, the vacuum that goes around on your floor,
Right.
the Roomba. So they bought them for, 1 billion, 1.7 billion, something like that. And the idea is if you read through these articles about the acquisition strategy of the Roomba, is that Alexa is, they're taking in the information when you say, hey, Alexa, can you do this? They're taking in that information. They're trying to map out your household so they can think about what you want before you even want it. So with the Roomba capability to, go around your household, transmit data, what size house do you have, the square footage, what sort of sounds they're hearing, if you have children, that sort of stuff is being able to identify what you might want and then guess that before you even get to that point. And then I don't know if Nick, you want to talk about that, the network aspect that you were talking about before with the Alexa it's basically its own router, right?
Yeah, so they rolled out, like the Alexa mesh network, right? The mesh street network or whatever. And so it's really, it's interesting. It's a really cool project. It adds a lot of utility, but it is, they sold you a product, right? They're rolling out apps that you have to take quite a bit of work to opt out of, right? And they're not really publicizing it, and it's using your personal property and your own home network essentially to create a private network for them to fund. Again, I'm sorry, I can't speak to the details of it, but that's one of those issues where it's hard. That's something new, or at least in the application of just using this private item. And again, if you look at when you look at the way Alexa works, you go to the Amazon website for jobs, right? And you can find a job as an Alexa data processor. I don't remember the name, but you're essentially sitting there all day listening to recorded conversations, right? And matching it up with Alexa's transcription of it, right?
And it's not like Amazon is kickbacking people through a utility token or anything like that, right? Amazon is, you bought a device, now Amazon is utilizing that device to propagate Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're getting paid a portion of, the revenue that they're generating from this new stream. So I think that's the big issue, is that until there is some sort of mutually beneficial avenue between consumer and corporation, it's going to be tough to kind of implement these new technologies, especially with a company like Amazon, which, I'm thinking it's more akin to AT&T during the 90s when they had all this infrastructure with telecom, and, they were really just broken up through antitrust movements. I think Amazon is really kind of, with their, they've moved into pharmaceuticals, they're really all over the place. And it's like, do you want your Wi-Fi provider also giving you pharmaceuticals and delivering your books? Like, I feel like, sometimes it's do less and do it right than try to do everything and, not be successful in any of it.
Yeah, and I'll play closure here to wrap that up. So we talked about surveillance capital at the outset of this, and that's sort of what we're combating on a large scale, to sum it up. These companies are selling you as a product back. you are becoming the product with your data, with your choices, with what you're doing. And we're sort of want to take a step back. We want to sell the consumer a product that's theirs, that they own, and then that's where the relationship stops. There's no further transactional nature between us and the consumer unless they want to buy another product in our line that launches down the line. There's no continued relationship. You buy it once, you have it in your home, it runs autonomously on that network or however you set it up or configure it with our devices, and that's that. It's basically we're going back to go forward because I think that's where we need to go to address these problems. And sort of as we mentioned before, things are moving too fast. It's time to pump the brakes, sell the product. The consumer becomes the consumer again, and that's how we, progress down this line in the data world.
Could you talk a bit more about the actual products that you will be offering to the public, the physical products that they can use to hopefully replace a few of these, must-have products on the Black Friday shopping list?
Yeah, so we are very early in the development of this whole infrastructure. I mean, we really became a team, the three of us, mid-July. So, we're moving at a rapid pace, and sometimes we have to look at each other and pump the brakes ourselves because we get so excited about all the opportunities and the way that the current environment is going. But essentially, to break it down, the first iteration of what we're working on is a, home monitoring system. We have a hub device similar to your Amazon Alexa. Joe has it right there. It's the 7-inch display screen run on the Raspberry Pi device, which is open source. And then we have a camera unit. So the idea is that you can place the camera, and our initial target market is going to be a home monitoring. The way that the work from home aspect has, evolved. People are working from home, but want to monitor valuable items in their home if they're working in their office. Millennials are having more pets instead of children. The pet market for monitoring is growing exponentially. Even, young children, if they're sleeping and you're working during the day, to be able to monitor it. So our initial product is going to be an in-home monitoring system with a secure feed from camera to hub that you can rewind, play, store, export as you want, and it's going to be all done locally within your house. So that's the phase one with the product we're going to, bring to market to get our idea and brand out there. And then there's plenty of verticals and horizontals we can go through that, motion sensors, you have the door. If your door opens, there's alert on the hub. And if you weren't expecting someone, you can take action on why is that door opening. Basic, carbon monoxide sensors, all stuff that does monitoring of your home in a secure manner so that all stays locally and is stored locally. And then I know Nick is sort of leading from the front on the network aspect that brings the enterprise solution. So you can talk more about that, but we're really focusing on just getting this hub and camera to market initially, because like we said before, this is a huge endeavor that we're going to have to accomplish. And we really have to do it methodically, step by step, and then build it out, modular so that things can be easily added down the line, and the legwork to create that ecosystem was already developed in the first place.
Yeah, perfect. Joe, for a moment, that way the camera could capture you. Could you show the two devices you had previously?
Yeah, so the first is just a prototype of the hub. And then, it's a 7-inch touchscreen display. It plugs in with USB-C. It's Wi-Fi based, and all our prototypes are based off of Raspberry Pi components. So we've been using the Raspberry Pi components to do prototyping. So this would be the hub. It would be, kind of like the Echo replacement, or, more of a high-end like Vivint or ADT. This would be like your security hub for those types of networks. And then we have wireless cameras where we're still working out powering, but right now they're USB-C powered, and we have a back attachment that can be added. And, we're looking into trying to make this stuff real simple modular, right? I think Taylor attested to it. If we can make this something that people can just put AA's in, or something that can have solar charge on it for outside usage, we're really trying to make this kind of simple and modular. But, going back to what Taylor said, we're just starting out with the hub and the camera to establish a secure security feed. and to establish our security hub and our security network. And then from there, we have things like, the carbon monoxide detector, things like the door alarm, and all those parallels that come with that.
How do you guys think we can get people to care more about these types of issues? What, to get them away from big brands and begin to think about themselves as not just purchasing a product, but essentially becoming researchers for these big companies and informing them of what their habits and their routines and things like that. Because ultimately what it sounds like is you purchase an Amazon Echo for $25 or whatever it costs. I don't have one, but the little dot.
Smart man.
And well, it's an entry level device for a reason. It's priced accordingly. It makes great for quick gifts, and what the company gets for $20 is a wealth of information, and you become a researcher. I think of like user experience designers. There's a certain role called researcher where all you do is try to interview and survey a group of various potential customers, and you just ask them very simple questions on how they would interact with the interface of this product. But essentially what you're doing by purchasing this product is eliminating that, because you are the researcher. How can we get people to view these issues more in line with what we're talking about here today, and also to jump the gun and buy something that is more local and in-house, literally in-house, in terms of data collection?
Yeah, so I think our main target audience are people who are very, cognizant of the data situation. So people who are like DuckDuckGo users and Brave browser users, and people from the blockchain space who understand your digital fingerprint is literally worth its weight in gold, right? So I think attesting to these people, and really, I think something that people forget is like, you vote with your dollar. So, you've given up security for convenience going the route of Amazon or Google Nest. But, I think we're really at this pivotal turning point where people are starting to realize, this is a big security gap. And when you see videos of creeps, hacking Wi-Fi cameras and talking to parents as kids, I think, unfortunately, that has a lot of, ethos and like effect on the moral level. And I think that is unfortunately something that is going to spur this movement a lot, is, like Taylor said, right, monitoring systems for like baby monitors, pet camps, and stuff like that, where parents and young homeowners can have a secure system and trust it. That's our real harping selling point.
And there's going to be a natural rise in interest, right? So we're watching an emergence, right, of cybercrime, right, digital crime, cyber threats, all these issues, right? Crime is crime, right? Crime goes after soft targets. Crime doesn't want to work any harder than it can, right? So as the US government, as large institutions, financial segments, industry, all these large segments, right, the risk versus reward was always worth it, right? As they start to become hard targets, as they start to implement zero trust, as they start to actually build out their SOCs and have enough people working in their network defense centers and all these issues, the crime is going to be targeted to small businesses, to eventually to small, right? We're seeing it on a small scale where you're seeing identity theft, right? You're seeing that's what we're talking about here, where you're going to see that on a much higher scale, and it already is a massive crime with no answer, right? You can report it to the SEC and the FBI, but they're not going to come investigate the guy that stole $100 from a checking account that he started in your name in New York, right? It's not going to. You don't have any recourse for it. So as this becomes more prevalent, we're going to start, and that's one avenue, right? Just this diffusion of higher level technical digital crimes moving down into an educated population across the planet, where now targeting a mid-level company is tough, but phishing grandma is easy, and we're already doing these things, right? But we're going to see it on a much larger scale and on We're already seeing with the advent of nude photo blackmails of, on all these different social platforms of teens and tweens and whatnot. So you're just going to see a continuous rise of this. And with the additional education that companies and the US government is putting into cybersecurity training and awareness programs, right? You're seeing a large segment of these of individuals who work in corporate environments gaining this required knowledge, and it will diffuse through the population, but it takes time to get these messages until once you realize it is a threat to your family and beyond just the traditional, securing your home network, locking your door, whatever. All these issues with your data and access to your devices, and where your devices come from, and where your data is going, it's gonna force itself on the population at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely there's a balance that I think we're going to have to strike with the consumer between fear mongering and educational. We don't want to go overboard on causing fear, but the applicable information needs to be transmitted to the consumer about what actually is happening and the repercussions of their actions, and then using those actions as an educational tool for individuals to understand what happens when this stuff is, interfaced with your network, what happens when these devices are in your home in their current state. So I think our challenge is going to be balancing that line between the two. But I think we are seeing a seismic change in how people view data, as well as the supply chain issues we've talked about. Our goal is not to be the low cost provider that Amazon or these other companies are. We really want to build a brand and loyalty to that brand because we have an ethos, we have a mission, and we have something specific we're trying to accomplish. And we think that our message will resonate with people throughout the United States and other, key partners, and that, people will start to take the step. Like, you have 27 million and 60 million DuckDuckGo and Brave users. There are significant portions of the public that are understanding these, are now willing to take steps. Like, they choosing to use these browsers, which don't store their credit card information. They don't store any of their passwords. They're choosing the secure aspect rather than the ease of use. So we really want to focus on those individuals, build those relationships, and then use the educational aspects to inform the rest of the public.
Right. Well, one advantage of using all that, you can watch YouTube without ads.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now, from a neutral standpoint, I think the media plays a big role in this, because we highlight a lot of foreign actors like China, and how the government is intrinsically tied to the capitalistic companies that will produce a lot of the products we inevitably consume. But is there any real difference between the Chinese government and those companies, and kind of the companies that we have here that are pretty much doing the same thing? The only difference is we see them face to face a bit more.
I would
like
say,
Amazon.
yeah, I would say, like, with China, the difference is really the unlimited resources, right? So if push came to shove and Huawei had some sort of backend and they needed to get into a phone, they're going to get into that phone. And I think, unfortunately, we have seen companies, relinquish with warrantless searches like Amazon videos to local law enforcement. But when that happens, that's a big story. And I think people, find out about it within 4 to 6 months. So it does end up getting addressed. But when there's a state actor, and I think especially with the stuff going on in Ukraine and Russia right now, where you're seeing people when they're on their phones, you have Russian soldiers on Facebook, and it's like, we can tell their location. So I think, the state funded aspect of those types of endeavors is a lot more severe and austere than somebody like Amazon, but they're not different. There are two sides of the same coin. And I think, Amazon and Google, they really do their customers and, people, citizens of the countries that they're headquartered in, a graven disservice when they do these things, and they really, wane and lose the public trust through that. And I think, people, like I said before, can vote with their dollar. So, after a while, Amazon puts a bad taste in your mouth, you can go elsewhere. But when you have something that's state funded, there's no other option. So, like, people in China are still going to use Huawei phones because that's the only option, because it's a state representative and state, supplied service. So I think that's the big difference. But I just want to harp that they're two sides of the same coin. So it's I'm not trying to give Amazon or Google the pass on this because they're as guilty as a state funded program.
Yeah, and I don't view myself as a geopolitical expert or anything along those lines with any of these conversations. But I think what you're seeing with these companies is that they truly are becoming multinational. They are operating beyond traditional borders that American businesses have done previously. And through that, they're able to focus solely on the bottom line. The shareholder value is what they're worried about, is creating wealth for their shareholders. And they're going to do what is best in line for the shareholders and to increase that wealth. And that's sort of what you get is the cheapest production, cheapest manufacturing costs, how they can make the most money with a single, you talked about the return on them selling one of those little $25, echoes that listens to you you can't really measure it, the return on what valuable information comes from that once it's in your household. So I think that, really having a mission and ethos behind what we're trying to accomplish. We've looked at Black Rifle Coffee. What they're really trying to accomplish, they're not the lowest cost coffee that you can get, but they're building a community and a brand around what they're building. And they have a core mission and a core ethos that they operate by. Like their goal is to employ 10,000 veterans, and they're well on their way to doing that. So I think people really are resonating with not corporations, but a business. They're a business, not a corporation, going down this line and, standing by what they believe in and operating as such.
Yeah, it kind of feels, I'm gonna tie it into Ergo. I have to do that for a channel, right? It kind of feels like you guys are looking for your niche where the concerned potential customers are already looking for somebody to fill in that gap and grow out from there, right? One thing about the blockchain space that kind of ties into all of this privacy discussion is that up until Monero, really around 2013, 2014, you really, and you still don't have this, you don't really have a privacy centric focus on blockchain simply because the fact that you can't trace things, and we were talking about this a bit before the interview, the fact that you can't trace things when using things like mixers scares the hell out of governments. You may not have anything to hide, but nevertheless, we're seeing this recently with Ethereum's Tornado Cash, where any funds mixed and made anonymous through that Tornado Cash program is pretty much a clandestine version of Ethereum, and any user or address that manages to be contaminated by that will ultimately be banned from using certain services like Aave, which is a crypto lending platform. One of the things about cryptocurrencies that governments can't do anything about, and maybe by using this Raspberry Pi and having all this open source code, is the fact that programming code is simply commands for a computer to perform a function, from what I understand. And that is supposed to be protected under First Amendment as free speech. And you can shut down one protocol, but nevertheless, the code lives on and it can be reproduced somewhere else. It's kind of like an idea. Once it gets out there, you can't really burn all the books and expect people to forget about it. Do you guys, where do you see the future of privacy? I know Ergo has this optional mixer, and they give you the option. It's not mandatory to mix your funds, but ultimately the thing that I think Ergo and hopefully more crypto platforms begin to really champion is the fact that privacy is a human right, and we kind of forget that a lot because we see things as, or we've been pitched the idea that if you have something private, you have something to hide. And if you have nothing to hide, therefore you should not advocate for privacy. It's almost like an insinuation. Where do you see the future of privacy going as we get more technologically dependent on these services and products to make our lives easier? At least that's the marketing pitch, right? Make your life easier, but at what cost?
Yeah, I can kind of address this in 3 points because I think you hit a lot of, good, good ideas here. I think the main one is ergo as a philosophy. So I think Taylor said, we kind of been moving technology, but we're at the point where we need to take a step back and kind of see what we've set into motion. I think Ergo kind of did that on the blockchain side, right? Everybody was going to this like address based, like Ethereum based smart contract. And what did Ergo do? They looked back and they said, all right, what's the best parts of Bitcoin that was working well, the input output system? And then they basically revitalized that system and then made it more smart contract centric. So you can build off these boxes. So I think that kind of philosophy of like, it's not always what's doing best now. We can take a little piece of everything and build and take that amalgamation and build something great from it. And then I would say the second part would be, the First Amendment. So cryptography was actually labeled a munition up until recently. So things like cryptographical algorithms were, you couldn't write a paper about cryptography and publish it in a book up until recently, which is pretty, or you could, but you couldn't, then send that book elsewhere. And then teachers who were, or professors who were teaching cryptography at university couldn't teach cryptography with foreigners in their class. So I think this stuff is so new, and this is like 2010s we're talking about. So this is all very recent stuff, and it's very, come to the forefront very quickly. So I think just the idea of being able to step back and assess where we are and where we need to be, and then also being mindful that, open source is really moving the ball and it's moving it quickly and it's letting a lot of people get involved. And I think open source and AI in particular are going to revitalize the whole landscape. And it's not going to be as much as people, being knowledgeable, as people being creative and being able to take these tools and build with them. So I think, we really are at a turning point, and we're starting to see that with all these, startups and small blockchains that are coming out of everything.
Yeah, you have companies like Black Hills Information Security, where you have really smart people releasing really useful tools for implementation, and it just takes a little bit of effort to kind of commercialize those to really get those or get them to where they can really be used on a mass scale too. It's just so many free tools out there, so much great technology, and it just kind of needs to be organized and have those tenets of easy to use kind of overlaid onto them with underlying security built into it, right?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned, what's the future of data and privacy? I think where we're trying to go is corporate transparency with user privacy. Corporations are going to need to be able to speak to what's being collected, where it's being collected, where it goes, and how it's used, while the user's data remains private and theirs. I think that's going to be the balance to be stricken down the line. And, being able to say that is going to be very important, because I know I've been guilty before. We're security, privacy minded. What's easy? Oh, terms of service, agree. If you've seen the South Park episode where they talk about, no one reading the terms of service, it's pretty funny, but it's a reality. Who really reads the terms of service? So the idea is that to be able to express the terms of service that get people to actually want to read them and understand where it's going to be, and that all comes from education. And that's going to be really important going down the line, is the proponents of education about data and privacy is going to be pivotable to people moving in the right direction as it relates to data.
When you create your products very quickly, I know that you're keeping everything on the shores, so to speak, made in America, or the United States. Can you really, what is the balance that you have to strike between outsourcing certain things that would be easier and cheaper to do elsewhere, and then also the integrity of knowing where these items are coming from and how they can compromise or not compromise your overall vision when you can't really see who it is or what it is helping you to create your products. Just kind of that topic, you guys would be able to be more informed about that than I.
Yeah, so that's our long-term vision, and that's really where we want to eventually become a domestic supply, a small-scale domestic supplier of electronics, right? Secure electronics, eventually branch into to U.S. government contracting and become, work towards that goal. And this is obviously, right, we didn't come up with this issue. There are multiple government agencies aware of this issue, working on this issue, and it's really having access to that, to be aware, to go, right. I've come across this knowledge, millions of other individuals have come across this knowledge through the, either daily, schedule, work, right, however you come across it, but getting that concepts to flow down, right, all right, it takes us working at it. So we're going to come into a manufacturing issue, right, at some point, right? We're look at what's going on in with South Korea, North Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, right? That entire shipping corridor, whether it's a cyber attack or a physical blockade, right? We're at a razor's edge here with our supply lines, and so bringing all of those issues, there's so much supply chain risk that is unmitigated, right? We just accept the risk because, kind of going back to the future of privacy, but it all ties into the future of manufacturing, right? And how do we address globalized manufacturing? And like you said, there is still a time and place for it, but it comes down to the operating environment of the outsourced areas. What regulations enforce them, and picking your outsourcing partners is vital to it. Right? And I think a lot of it is going to have to be reshored, right? It has to move back to domestic production, at least for some segment of the customer that wants to address those supply chain issues that right now aren't addressed, right? So we just have this massive level of risk. When you manufacture something anywhere right, any supplier and contractor, anytime you have a level of risk, right? But distributed, globalized supply chain and operating in a hostile economy, essentially, exponentially increases that risk. It's like if we were still 20, 30 years ago, we were outsourcing our ICBMs to friggin' Belarus, like it just doesn't make any sense, the system we have right now. And it's going, it's apparent to certain people, and it's going to diffuse to the general population at some point.
And I think like the pandemic, right, highlighted all these, supply chain issues because they were exacerbated by the influx of people at home and all the things that needed to go through these pipelines, right? So I think, one major thing was in the beginning, right, the United States military was running out of medicine. And it's like, do we not make enough medicine just to suffice the military in the US? Because I feel like that's a huge liability. And, it comes out to kind of like, right, we're a free country, and what happens is there's contracts that go out and the lowest bidder gets these contracts, and they may not be, US centric. So I think, unfortunately, through this pandemic, it kind of highlighted a lot of strains that we already have. And, kind of looking back, it is kind of a shame because, my dad was a union electrician, and I think like skilled labor has kind of been written off a little bit, especially from someone who's coming from like an academic background. You're kind of pushed to go to university, and you're pushed to like, get a blue collar job or whatever. But I think there's a lot of high skilled jobs that can come back and be, brought in with, these fabrication facilities that are manufacturing or fabricating, wafers for processors. There's 5 200 nanometer fabrication centers for CPU processors just in Massachusetts alone. So I think the infrastructure is there. It's just bringing it back and making it a big point. Like we've already kind of identified places that, like Broadcom is a big US company that supplies chips, Texas Instruments, they do a lot of good components. So, the infrastructure is there. It's just utilizing that and understanding, all right, this 20% premium on this part is worth it because, when push comes to shove down the line, we'll have this at home. And if I need to fly down to Texas, I can fly down to Texas and, grease the wheels and get this done.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to accomplish this on an island just ourselves. We're going to need key partners and build key relationships with other entities and a lot smarter individuals who are working on these issues around the country. And that's sort of where we think we can bring that value added is bringing all those pieces together, identifying the infrastructure we need for this, and then leading from the front so that other entrepreneurs can build through this process. You're seeing a lot of success with hyper local, clothing wear companies starting. They're buying up old, factories in the U.S. and bringing back that pride in textile manufacturing. So you're seeing these successful paths being done in the clothing aspect of it, and we want to take that next step to something that's vital to the American economy, which is these key electronic components and equipment that really drive the economy and support the federal government.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You're not only going against the grain with the privacy approach, but you're also doing so in another way through the supply chain approach. Usually, these are in of themselves, each individual aspect of what you're trying to tackle would be a big challenge in of itself. So combining the two, that takes a good healthy chunk of balls to be able to go after both. One final thing I'd like to mention. I think you're right, Joe, that the pandemic really highlighted a lot of our insufficiencies. I mean, that goes without saying. And out of every negative, there are some potential positives as well. And I'm not so confident the reshoring is it's not. I'm not so confident it is being addressed with the type of seriousness it needs, because it's not even from a nationalistic point of view. It's just from a self-sufficiency point of view that we have, what is it, 350 million people here, and then it's kind of paradoxical. You have a shortage of this, and you have potentially we were headed towards a really bad situation where we could have had high unemployment as well, and we have a shortage of workers potentially at that time, and also a shortage of goods, and nobody knowing how to do any of it, because we're so service oriented, we're so white collar. We only deal with the things that are more service focused typically, and that's what the new generation is supposed to strive to do. And we don't have any of the really hands-on, work with your hands type of people. And if you are some of those people, you're always in this niche minority that wants to see the country prosper self-sufficiently. And I think that wouldn't be a bad idea. I couldn't imagine China not having what they need if during the middle of the pandemic, if they were hit as badly as we were, because they have everything all around them.
And when you think about these things that are right, what's in shortage right now? Semiconductors. What are semiconductors made out of? Silicon. They're just fucking sand. So, it's not the scarcity of the resource or the expense of the materials and fabrication. It's just building the fabrication facilities, and obviously the purity of the silicon is a huge thing. So it's the fabrication process and building these facilities. So it's not like we need to go to China and use lithium, right, to get all this stuff done. We can bring back semiconductor manufacturing to the United States, and that's not necessarily something we want to address. But by printing our own circuit boards and going through this kind of lead from the front, we hope other people start doing this, because like you said, these are big endeavors, and we're going to need a lot more allies than enemies in this. And, we're trying to work in a collaborative way and kind of, bring the storm, and really kind of facilitate some true change.
There's two things I'd like to add just before we finish. Kind of going back to that, we were talking about the pandemic and kind of this, what you can achieve here. And there's a story out of Northeast. I'm a student at Northeastern University, and they did a story on a alumni individual. They started a company. They were making ice hockey skates or something like that, and they had a lot of the equipment, manufacturing power to handle small scale numbers of ice skates for hockey. Shuts down. The company is almost bankrupt. I think they had like 100 employees or something along that lines. The guy pivoted, right? I think they got rid of the property or something like that. They distributed all of their equipment to all their employees' garages. and they restarted production with building, and they were able to then switch the line over to face masks for pandemic, the hospitals and whatnot. But they pivoted. They don't need the centralized production facility, right? Some of our homes are completely capable of operating a 24-hour small-scale manufacturing facility. Yeah, you still have a lot of costs and regulatory issues and zoning issues and power, whatever. It's all, you can handle it, and you can run these small-scale operations in a novel way like that. And I just like that story about addressing, right? You can't go to the factory, so you spread the factory around to the people that have the space for it, and we already have the system in place with UPS and Amazon delivery, et cetera, to get this stuff moving. And then second, right, a lot of the cost effectiveness of offshoring and globalization and whatnot is going to go away as cybercrime and as cyber insurance just is starting to hammer companies, right? And the cost effectiveness is no longer going to be there as all of these issues start to come in there, and it's going to make more sense to come back, I think, anyways, right? So the incentive to doing these things in other places isn't going to be there when you have additional new costs as regulations come in and affect it, right? And companies are already seeing skyrocketing, like something along the line, like a 10x rise in premiums for cyber insurance for across certain industries, and that's gonna diffuse. It's already started. It's spreading, and that's gonna force a lot of companies to rethink their supply chains.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never considered that cyber insurance. Yeah. Yeah, that could be, yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
to wrap it all
yeah, go
up.
ahead.
Yeah, thanks. We're really at a pivotal point in our society right now in the United States, I feel like it's very palpable across the country on where we are. And I think we need individuals to really take these steps up and to make changes. I don't think that it can be necessarily done through the traditional political landscape anymore. You're going to need individuals to make these changes internally and do some of the ideas that we're working on to make those changes. Because if we adopt these and go through, and when we're successful, others are going to follow suit because we can prove that the model can be successful, it can be done, and then that's where you're really going to see the change, not by necessarily voting in November. It's going to be by people, bringing themselves up by the bootstraps, to use a lack of a better term, but actually doing what needs to be done to make these changes and sort of get us back on track on where we need to go. And that's what we hope to accomplish here.
And I think this is a good time to just do the plug of, if this is stuff that you think is interesting and you want to get involved and you kind of see what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring on some more software developers and people who are, in this space and are security centric. And I think, you could reach out to me anytime. It's Joseph at sentientsecurity.io. Check out our
electrical
website.
electrical engineers, yeah. security software engineers, and network engineers.
If you have a KiCad background, definitely DM me. So
yeah. And if you don't want any money, if you just want to work for free, also.
Oh yeah, we really want to find like-minded people, and we think there are a lot of individuals who feel the same way that we do and are looking to accomplish great things. And we're looking to bring these individuals on board and join this team. And that's how you're going to be successful. You have a solid team in place. It's not going to be done with the three of us. It's going to take, a community and a village to get this done. And we're looking forward to taking it on.
What a way to end it. I didn't really have to do anything for that. You guys brought it home on your own. Well, thank you so much. Again, if you want to learn more about them, I'll put links in the description of where you can find out more information. And I would encourage you to support initiatives that are a little more grassroots and, kind of a second guess or question. When you buy something, as Joe said, you vote with your dollar. What are you voting towards, in the long term? Without any further ado, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.